Hey folks, thanks for joining me for part 4 of our AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner Exam Practice Question Series. Today we will go through 30 more questions that resemble the type of content you will likely encounter in the Cloud Practitioner exam. Before we dive into the questions, if you are interested in getting the PDF file with the full set of questions, feel free to join the channel as a gold member. Just email me at devopshub2023@gmail.com with your membership confirmation to receive your PDF copy.
A company wants to set up a domain name system, DNS record for its application with a failover routing policy that is based on health checks. Which AWS service or resource should the company use to achieve this goal? Your options are Amazon Kendra, Application Load Balancer, Amazon Route 53, AWS WAF. Whenever you see any question related to DNS, then you need to look for Route 53 service. Another way to remember this is that DNS server responds to queries on port 53, and that's where AWS service for DNS gets its name from. Now you can have different type of routing policies in case of DNS, but for the scope of this question, they intend to use failover routing policy. You can refer to the link on my screen to read more about routing policies in Amazon Route 53. A business wants to provide a user access to an Amazon S3 bucket. Which element of S3 bucket policy contains information about the users who need access to the bucket? Your options are principal, action, resource, effect. Principal is the element that holds the information about the user, account, or service that is the recipient of the permission. Now, action holds the information about the set of operations which will be allowed or denied using the effect element. Resource is the S3 bucket object access point for which you apply the permission. A company plans to migrate its custom marketing and order processing application to AWS. The company needs to deploy the application on different type of instances with various configurations of CPU, memory, and networking capacity. Which AWS service should the company use to meet these requirements? Your options are Amazon Athena, Amazon EC2, AWS Lambda, Amazon Cognito. Keyword to answer this question is they are looking for an option which provides them flexibility to choose different type of configuration in terms of CPU, RAM, and networking. So the correct answer is option B, Amazon EC2. You can browse to the link which is on my screen to read more about different type of Amazon EC2 instances. You can expect to get some questions around different type of Amazon EC2 instances in your exam. Moving on to next question. Which service provides a virtually unlimited amount of online highly durable object storage? Your options are Amazon S3, Amazon Redshift, Amazon Elastic Container Service, Amazon Elastic File System. Now, option B and C are automatically eliminated in this case as they are looking for storage solution. Redshift is a data warehousing solution and ECS is a container orchestration solution, which leaves us with option A and option D. Since they are looking for object-based storage, so the correct answer is option A, Amazon S3. EFS, as the name indicates, is a file-based storage solution. If you are looking to learn more about Amazon S3, then I already have a detailed video around this on my channel. Check it out as it covers aspects from both Cloud Practitioner and Solution Architect exams. Let's now look at another variation of this question. Which AWS service provides a simple and scalable shared file storage solution for use with Linux-based AWS and on-premise servers? Your options are Amazon S3, Amazon Glacier, Amazon EBS, Amazon EFS. You should already know the correct answer based on the previous explanation, so I'll directly head to the solution. The right answer is option D, Amazon EFS. For your future reference, EBS is block storage and Glacier is one of the classes of S3 storage, which is again an object-based storage. Question number 126. Which of the following components of AWS infrastructure consists of one or more discrete data centers interconnected through low latency links? Your options are edge location, availability zone, region, AWS private link. You do get such questions in AWS Cloud Practitioner exam where the question is just a definition of a feature. And in this case, the question in itself is the definition of availability zone. So the correct answer is option B, availability zone. As you can read the definition on my screen, availability zone is one or more discrete data centers with redundant power, networking, and connectivity in an AWS region. All AZs in an AWS region are interconnected with high bandwidth, low latency networking. Moving on to question number 127. What approach of transcoding a large number of individual video files adheres to AWS architecture principles? Your options are using many instances in parallel, using dedicated hardware, using a single large instance during off-peak hours, using a large GPU instance type. Now, option A, which is using many instances in parallel, seems to be a good candidate as parallel processing will lead to faster execution. Next option, to use dedicated hardware, will help, however, will also result in increase in cost. So not something recommended. Option C is again some kind of dedicated hardware during off-peak hours, so not a right option. Using a large GPU instance will help, however, not as much as compared to option A. So the correct answer is option A. Now, as a thumb rule, multi-threading is always better than serial processing. You are tasked with finding a low-cost, long-term solution for data backups. Which AWS service would you choose as a solution? Your options are Amazon EBS, Amazon RDS, Amazon S3 Glacier, AWS Snowball. Whenever there is a talk about data backup and archiving solution in AWS, then you should look for S3 Glacier in the options. So the right answer is option C, Amazon S3 Glacier. It is a secure and durable service for low cost data archiving and long term backup. Question number 129. Which of the following is AWS sole responsibility when talking about AWS shared responsibility model? Your options are managing IAM policies, physical data center security, Amazon S3 bucket policies, auditing AWS CloudTrail logs. Now, since the customers don't have visibility or access to physical data centers, so its management is AWS responsibility. Other three options mentioned in this question are customer responsibility. Whenever you get such questions, then think of the quote, AWS is responsible for security of the cloud and customer is responsible for security in the cloud. As soon as you think about this quote, your options will be crystal clear and you will instantly know what the correct option is in the question. Question number 130. Which of the following disaster recovery scenarios offers the lowest possibility of downtime? Your options are backup and restore, warm standby, pilot light, multi-site active active. When it comes to lowest downtime or zero downtime, then the correct answer is multi-site active active disaster recovery. However, this option is the most costly to implement. You can refer to the diagram on my screen to understand different types of disaster recovery strategies. You can expect to get some questions around this in exam. So I would highly recommend you to refer to the link on my screen and understand this in more detail. Question number 131. Which methods can be used to identify AWS costs by departments? You need to choose two options. Your options are create separate accounts for each department, use reserved instances where possible, enable multi-factor authentication for root user, use tags to associate each instance with a particular department, pay bills using purchase orders. The correct answers are option A and option D. You should create separate accounts for each department and use tags to associate each instance with a particular department. This is also called as cost allocation tags. Now, option B, which is to use reserved instances, will help you in cost reduction but not identify resources by cost. So it is incorrect. And option C talks about multi-factor authentication, which is a security feature and doesn't help you in identifying resources by cost. Option C is again a distractor here, which leaves us with option A and option D. Next question. Which of the following is AWS responsibility in the AWS shared responsibility model? Your options are updating the security group rules to block traffic to vulnerable ports, updating the network ACLs to block traffic to vulnerable ports, updating the firmware of the underlying EC2 hosts, patching operating system running on Amazon EC2 instances. Now, remember the quote that I was mentioning in one of the previous questions. AWS is responsible for security of the cloud, and customers are responsible for security in the cloud. Going by that statement, you should understand that the correct answer is updating the firmware of the underlying EC2 host. Now, why it is the responsibility of AWS? Because customers don't have access to underlying host in the AWS infrastructure. So it becomes AWS's responsibility to keep the host firmware up to date. And when it comes to option A, B, and D, customer has full control over these things. So it's their responsibility to manage them. Question number 133. What tasks should a customer perform when they suspect an AWS account has been compromised? You need to choose two options. Your options are remove MFA tokens, rotate passwords and access keys, move resources to a different AWS region, delete AWS CloudTrail logs, contact AWS support. Correct answers in this case are option B and option E. You should rotate passwords and access keys, and you should contact AWS support as well. In fact, you should immediately change the password and update the access keys that you might have generated in past as soon as you become aware that your account has been compromised. And then you should contact AWS support and take actions as per their guidance. How do Amazon EC2 autoscaling help achieve high availability for a web application? Now, option A, they enable the application's static content to reside closer to end users. No, this is a feature of CloudFront. So, incorrect options. Now, option B, they automatically add more instances across multiple AWS regions based on global demand on the application. This option definitely provides high availability. However, EC2 autoscaling doesn't add instances to multiple regions. So again, an incorrect option. Option C, they are able to distribute incoming requests across a tier of web server instances. It is a feature of load balancer. So again, incorrect. This now leaves us with option D, which is the correct answer. They automatically add or replace instances across multiple availability zone when the application needs it. Now, there is a close resemblance between option B and option D. So you should always read the option very carefully to see if there is a keyword that might make the option wrong before you even attempt to answer. So you might be in a situation that you start reading the options and you think option B is correct, but you don't you don't want to read option C and D because you are sure that option B is correct. But that there might be a keyword hidden in option B, which will make it incorrect. So always read all the options carefully before deciding your answer. Moving on to question number 135. A user is able to set up a master payer account to view consolidated billing using which of the following AWS service? Your options are AWS Budgets, Amazon Macy, AWS Organizations, Amazon QuickSight. The correct answer in this case is AWS Organizations because it provides you with the capability to centrally manage and govern your cloud environment. AWS Budgets is the simplest way to monitor your AWS spend and be alerted when you exceed or are forecasted to exceed your desired spending limit, which is not what is asked in this question. Now, Amazon Macy is a data security service that uses machine learning and pattern matching to discover and help protect your sensitive data. And the last option, option D, Amazon QuickSight is a cloud powered business analytics service that makes it easy for all the employees within an organization to build visualizations. Which of the following AWS service or feature allows user to connect with and deploy AWS services programmatically? Your options are AWS Cloud9, AWS Management Console, AWS Code Pipeline, AWS Software Development Kits, SDKs. Let's apply the elimination approach here. First option is AWS Cloud9, which is a cloud-based integrated development environment that you use to write, run, and deploy code. So an incorrect choice. Now the option B, AWS Management Console, is obviously incorrect as it is the graphical user interface to access AWS Console. Then the third option we have is AWS Code Pipeline, which is AWS Continuous Delivery Service, making it an incorrect choice, leaving us with AWS SDK, which is the correct answer. Now with SDK, you can easily develop applications on AWS in the programming language of your choice, which includes C++, Java, Python, Ruby, Node.js, and many more. Let's look at next question of the series. A company wants to migrate a critical application to AWS. The application has a short runtime. The application is invoked by changes in data or by shifts in system state. The company needs a compute solution that maximizes operational efficiency and minimizes the cost of running the application. Which AWS solution should the company use to meet these requirements? Your options are AWS Lambda, Amazon EC2 reserved instances, EC2 spot instances, EC2 on-demand instances. This is one of the questions where there are lots of clues in it pointing to the definition of a feature. The first clue here is short runtime. Then there is a mention of using triggers to invoke it. And most importantly, the question talks about maximizing the operational efficiency and minimizing the cost of running application, which points us to look for something which is serverless, as we are talking about operational efficiency and minimizing the cost of running application. And in the list of options, we only have one option, which is serverless, that is AWS Lambda. And you would already know that AWS Lambda is serverless, which has a short runtime and can be invoked using different type of triggers. Question number 138 of the series. A company plans to create a data lake that uses Amazon S3. Which factor will have the most effect on cost? Your options are charges to transfer existing data into Amazon S3, the selection of S3 storage tiers, S3 ingest fees for each request, the addition of S3 bucket policies. Now you need to choose the option which will have most effect on cost. There can be multiple options which have effect on cost, but you need to choose the one which has the most effect. The storage class used in S3 can definitely have impact on the cost of the data lake. Different storage classes have different pricing tiers. For example, using the Glacier storage class for infrequently accessed data can be much cheaper than using the standard storage class for frequently accessed data. So the correct answer is option B, the selection of S3 storage tiers. How does the AWS cloud pricing model differ from the traditional on-premise storage pricing model? Your options are: there are no upfront cost commitments, there are no infrastructure operating costs, AWS resources do not incur costs, there are no software licensing costs. The AWS cloud pricing model differs from the traditional on-premise storage pricing model in several ways. One of the primary differences is that there are no upfront cost commitments with AWS. With on-premise storage, a business would typically have to purchase and maintain their own physical storage devices, which can require a significant upfront investment. Now, here we are basically talking about CapEx and OpEx, which is capital expenditure or operational expenditure. When you move from on-premise to cloud, then you basically make a move from capital expenditure to operational expenditure. If you don't know about capital expenditure and operational expenditure, I already have a series which is more focused on Azure, but I have a video in that series which is explaining the differences between capex and opex. So I would recommend you to go through that video, which I'll be linking to this one as well. Let's move to next question. A company is developing a mobile app that needs a high performance NoSQL database. Which AWS service should the company use for this database? Your options are, and you need to choose the two options. Now the options are Amazon RDS, Amazon Aurora, Amazon Document DB with MongoDB compatibility, Amazon Redshift, Amazon DynamoDB. You would have already understood that the main keyword in this question is you need to look for a NoSQL database. And the options available, the two NoSQL databases are DocumentDB and DynamoDB, making option C and option E as the correct choice. Question number 41 of the series. Which AWS service or tool should a company use to centrally request and track service limit increases? Your options are AWS Service Catalog, AWS Budgets, AWS Config, Service Quotas. The correct answer is Service Quota. It is a AWS service that helps you manage your quotas for many AWS services from one location. Along with looking up the quota values, you can also request a quota increase from the Service Quota console. It was formerly referred to as limits. You can see the link on my screen, which you can refer to read more about service quotas. A company wants to launch its workload on AWS and requires the system to automatically recover from failure. Which pillar of the AWS well-architected framework includes this requirement? Your options are operational excellence, performance efficiency, reliability, cost optimization. So basically here we are looking for the pillar which is inclined towards automatic recovery from failure. And this is one of the design principles of reliability pillar. Now there are different pillars in the well-architected tool of AWS. So I strongly suggest you to go through the link which are there on your screen now to understand this in more detail, as there will be different questions from this in your exam. Question number 143. Which of the following AWS service uses edge locations? Your options are AWS Global Accelerator, Amazon Connect, Amazon Aurora, AWS Outposts. The correct answer is option A, AWS Global Accelerator. Next question. A company has a single Amazon EC2 instance. The company wants to adopt a highly available architecture. What can the company do to meet this requirement? Your options are change the EC2 instance family to a compute optimized instance, scale vertically to a larger EC2 instance size, scale horizontally across multiple availability zones, purchase an EC2 dedicated instance. Now here they are looking for high availability. So let's first see what happens when you go with option A. Now, option A is to change the EC2 instance to a compute optimized instance. With this, you'll get more compute power, but you won't get high availability. So the option is incorrect. Option B talks about scaling vertically to a larger size, which will give you more CPU and RAM, but again, no high availability. So an incorrect choice. Now, option C, which talks about scaling horizontally in multiple AZ, means you are adding more VMs in a different availability zone, which will give you high availability. As if one VM goes down, then you have a different one, making option C as the correct choice. But before proceeding forward, let's look at option D as well. Why the option D is not correct. Now, purchasing an EC2 dedicated instance doesn't provide you high availability because you just have a dedicated instance, but the instance is still one. So if the instance goes down, you don't have anything as a backup, which means option D is again incorrect. Let's move at question 145 of the series. A company is preparing to launch a new web store that is expected to receive high traffic for an upcoming event. The web store runs only on AWS, and the company has an AWS enterprise support plan. Which AWS resource will provide guidance about how the company should scale its architecture and operational support during the event? Your options are the designated AWS technical account manager, also called as TAM, AWS abuse team, AWS professional services, AWS infrastructure event management. The correct answer here is option D, AWS infrastructure event management, also called as IEM. They offer architectural and scaling guidance and operational support during the preparation and execution of planned events such as shopping holidays, product launches, and migrations. For these events, AWS Infrastructure Event Management will help you assess operational readiness, identify and mitigate risks, and execute your event confidently with AWS experts by your side. The program is included in the enterprise support plan and is available to business support customers for an additional fee. So you pay for the service. Question number 146 of the series. A company wants to limit its employee AWS access to a portfolio of predefined AWS resources. Which AWS solution should the company use to meet this requirement? Your options are AWS Software Development Kit, AWS Service Catalog, AWS App Sync, AWS Config. The correct answer here is AWS Service Catalog. Service Catalog allows you to create, organize, and govern a curated catalog of AWS resources that can be shared at the permission level. So you can quickly provision approved cloud resources without needing direct access to the underlying AWS services. Next question. Which of the following AWS services lets connect devices easily and securely interact with cloud applications and other devices? Your options are AWS IoT Core, Amazon SNS, AWS Directory Service, Amazon Cognito. These type of questions are literally the easiest questions that you can get in exam, as they have just mentioned definition of a service as the question. And the correct answer in this case is AWS IoT Core, which lets connected devices easily and securely interact with cloud applications and other devices. Next question. A developer wants to use an Amazon S3 bucket to store application logs that contain sensitive data. Which AWS service or feature should the developer use to restrict read and write access to the S3 bucket? So someone wants to store sensitive data in a S3 bucket. and they want to secure read and write access to the S3 bucket. Which feature should they use to implement this kind of access? Your options are security groups, Amazon CloudWatch, ACLs, and AWS Cloud Trails. So the correct answer in this case is ACLs. ACL, also the full form is access control list, are one of the resource based options that you can use to manage access to your buckets and objects. You can use ACLs to grant basic read and write permissions to other AWS accounts. I would highly suggest you to go through the link on your screen to understand how ACLs work, as you might want to use this in your implementations as well. Moving on to next question. A retail company is building a new mobile app. The company is evaluating whether to build the app at an on-premise data center or in AWS cloud. Which of the following are benefits of building this app in the AWS cloud? You need to choose two options here. So your options are complete control over the physical security of the infrastructure, flexibility to scale up in minutes as the application becomes popular, ability to pick the specific data centers that will host the application servers, increased speed for trying out new projects, a large upfront capital expense, and low variable expenses. So you need to choose the benefits of building the app in the AWS cloud. No matter what is mentioned before this line in the question, in this question, what you need to do is you need to choose two benefits of building the app in AWS cloud. Let's start with option A. Option A talks about complete control over the physical security of the infrastructure. Whenever you are dealing with cloud, you don't really have access to the physical infrastructure. So this cannot be the right option. Let's look at option 2. Flexibility to scale up in minutes as the application becomes popular. Yes, this seems the right option because with any cloud vendor, you can practically scale as much as you want in minutes because the vendor has already catered for growing demand of clients. So this seems to be the right option. Let's look at option C. Ability to pick the specific data center that will host the application servers. It doesn't seem to be the right option because you don't have the ability to choose the specific data centers. You have the ability to choose the availability zone or the region, but you don't have an option to choose a specific data center. Let's look at option D. Increase speed for trying out new project. Yes, this seems to be the right option because you have whole services at your disposal and you can spin up the infrastructure in just few clicks. So you get increased speed for trying out new projects. Suppose you want to use serverless computing. You have everything at your disposal and you just need to create the Lambda functions in just few clicks. Now we already have the two right options, which are option B and option D, but let's look at option E, why this is not correct. A large upfront capital expense and low variable expense. This is the classic definition of capital expenditure. But here in cloud, remember my statement, we make a move from capital expenditure to operational expenditure. So this is not the correct option. Let's look at the next question of the series. A company uses Amazon Workspaces. According to the AWS shared responsibility model, which task is the responsibility of AWS? Your options are provide security for workspaces user accounts through AWS Identity and Access Management, IAM. Configure AWS Cloud Trail to log API calls and user activity. Set up multi-factor authentication for each workspace user account. Ensure the environmental safety and security of the AWS infrastructure that hosts workspaces. Whenever you have questions related to shared responsibility model, think whether you as a customer have access to perform the activity being talked about in the question. If you have access, then most likely that will fall under your responsibility. And if you don't have access, then it will be most likely AWS responsibility. Now, in this case, option D, where there is a talk about security of the AWS infrastructure, seems the correct answer, as customers don't have access to AWS infrastructure. Remember, when I say you have access, you don't really need to look for your access, because you might not be a global admin who has whole level of access. So you need to think from a customer perspective, as a customer, whether you have access to do those sort of things or not. Now let's look at other three options as well. Provide security for workspaces user account through AWS IAM. So you do have access to play around with IAM. That means you should be able to do it, which means it is your responsibility. Configure AWS CloudTrail to log API calls and user requests. Again, you have access to configure CloudTrail events, so this is your responsibility. And the third option, set up MFA for each workspace. Yes, customers do have access to set up MFA. Again, this lies under your responsibility. So there can be hundreds or thousands of variations of this question which talk about shared responsibility model. So it is very critical that you understand shared responsibility model, and there are definitely going to be some questions around this in your exam.
Thanks for staying until the end, friends. If you have enjoyed the content, don't forget to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe the channel. I'll see you in the next part of the series, so make sure to turn on notifications to be informed as soon as the video goes live. And remember, if you have not watched the previous parts yet, then link to them are available in the description section of this video. Make sure to watch them as well to get the maximum out of our content.